Did Vikings really worship snakes, and what if their gods weren't so different from us? The wind howled a mournful song across the North Sea, a sound that's echoed through centuries of speculation and myth. For generations, we've been told of fearsome warriors, longboats laden with plunder, and a brutal, bloodthirsty culture. But what if the story we've been told is just a sliver of a much more complex and, frankly, bizarre reality? Let's dive into the world of the Vikings not as monsters, but as people grappling with questions of power, belief, and the unsettling strangeness of existence. It all starts with bones. Not just any bones, but the skeletal remains of people who lived and died in the shadow of the fjords, amidst the rise and fall of kingdoms. Anna Kjellstrom, a specialist in people in transition, meticulously examined these bones, finding evidence of something far more troubling than simple famine. She unearthed signs of widespread malnutrition, a grim reminder that Viking life wasn't always a heroic saga of raiding and conquest. Children, particularly vulnerable, bore the brunt of this hardship, a stark contrast to the romanticized image of Viking strength. Imagine a world where the promise of adventure was often overshadowed by the desperate struggle for survival. Then there are the cribra orbitalia, tiny, almost invisible scars on the skulls of ancient Scandinavians. These aren't battle wounds, they're the aftermath of severe infections, a constant, low-level threat in a world without antibiotics. But here's the kicker, the scars weren't evenly distributed, they were more common in women. Why? Was it a matter of childbirth, of societal expectations, or something far more unsettling? The debate rages on, fueled by a desire to understand the hidden currents of Viking society. Let's talk about infanticide. A dark, uncomfortable truth emerges from the archaeological record. The scarcity of women in Viking-age Scandinavia suggests a chilling practice, selective female infanticide. Nancy Wicker, a historian of the period, argued that this wasn't simply a matter of population control. It was a deliberate attempt to maintain power structures to ensure the continuity of male lineages. Picture this, families making agonizing choices, sacrificing their daughters to secure their sons' futures. It's a brutal reflection of a society obsessed with legacy and control. Now, let's shift gears and consider the burials. Frida Espalin Norstein meticulously compared Viking burials in Scotland and Norway, uncovering fascinating differences. Viking women were buried with elaborate grave goods, jewelry, weapons, even animal sacrifices, suggesting a level of status and respect rarely afforded to women in other ancient cultures. But what about the men? Their burials were often starkly different, lacking the same opulent displays of wealth and status. Were they simply less wealthy? Or were they being deliberately stripped of their possessions, a symbolic rejection of their role in society? The Vikings weren't just warriors, they were also shrewd traders, skilled craftsmen, and surprisingly obsessed with appearances. Neil Price, a leading expert on Viking culture, delved into the world of anstosige corpor, shocking bodies, sexual practices. Runes, those enigmatic symbols carved into stone, weren't just used for divination. They were used to express desires, to ward off evil, and even to flaunt wealth and status. Imagine a Viking chieftain leaving a runic inscription on his shield, proclaiming his power and prowess. But what about the whispers of magic? The Vikings weren't just battling each other, they were battling spirits, demons, and the forces of chaos. The story of Loki's quarrel, the sayings of the High One, these weren't just myths, they were a way of understanding the world, of controlling the unpredictable forces of nature. And then there's the Rallinge figure, a bizarre, almost grotesque wooden idol, and the Danevirke phallus, a monumental stone carving that served as a potent symbol of male power. These objects weren't just decorations, they were tools of ritual, conduits for supernatural energy. And what about the Al-Ghazal mission? A surprising exchange of embassies between the Arab world and the Vikings, a testament to the interconnectedness of the ancient world. The Vikings weren't isolated barbarians, they were part of a complex network of trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Now let's confront a particularly unsettling aspect of Viking society, the concept of nid, the complex, a term coined by Preben Muhlengracht Sorensen to describe a deeply ingrained homophobia. Runes were used to insult, to shame, to ostracize those who deviated from societal norms. Imagine a Viking warrior being branded a nid, a term of derision that could ruin his reputation and his life. It's a chilling reminder that even in a society that celebrated strength and heroism, there was a dark undercurrent of intolerance and prejudice. The legal codes of Iceland, the Gragas, offer a fascinating glimpse into Viking Age justice. But these laws weren't just about punishing criminals, they were about maintaining social order, about reinforcing the power of the elite. And let's not forget the concept of polygyny, the practice of having multiple wives, a common feature of Viking society that challenged traditional notions of marriage and family. But what about the Viking gods? Were they benevolent protectors or capricious and terrifying beings? The sagas depict Odin, the Allfather, as a complex and contradictory figure, a warrior, a magician, a trickster. And what about Thor, the god of thunder, a symbol of strength and resilience? These gods weren't just figures of worship, they were embodiments of Viking values, of the ideals of courage, honor, and loyalty. Let's consider the idea of place, how the Vikings understood and interacted with their environment. Stefan Brink demonstrated how place names reflected power dynamics, revealing the shifting boundaries of kingdoms and the struggles for control. The theophoric names incorporating the names of the gods, were a way of asserting lineage and connection to the divine. And then there are the ships. The longboats, those sleek, seaworthy vessels, weren't just tools of transportation. They were symbols of Viking power, of their ability to conquer and control vast territories. The reconstruction of the Skeletal ships from the Oseberg and Gokstad graves has revealed a sophisticated understanding of shipbuilding, a testament to Viking ingenuity. But what about the disabled? The sagas often depict individuals with physical impairments as lesser gods, relegated to the margins of society. Lois Bragg highlighted the ways in which disability was viewed as a sign of divine displeasure, a punishment for transgressions. The world of the Vikings wasn't always a place of opportunity and advancement. It was a world of limitations and exclusions. Let's talk about time. The Vikings weren't just concerned with the present, they were obsessed with the past and the future. The runic inscriptions on the stones were often filled with prophecies, with warnings about the fate of the world. And the concept of time distance, the way the Vikings understood the passage of time, was profoundly different from our own. Finally, let's consider the question of magic. Britt Solly argued that the Norse myths weren't just stories, they were a framework for understanding the world, for harnessing supernatural power. Neil Price explored the idea of queered Iron Age, suggesting that the Vikings may have embraced gender fluidity and challenged traditional notions of sexuality. The Vivalin grave, with its collection of magical objects, offers a tantalizing glimpse into the world of Viking magic. So, what do we really know about the Vikings? The answer, as always, is complicated. They were warriors, yes, but they were also traders, craftsmen, and, perhaps most surprisingly, thinkers. They were brutal and compassionate, powerful and vulnerable. They were a people grappling with fundamental questions of existence, just like us. But the most important question of all is this: were they truly as monstrous as we've been led to believe? Or were they simply misunderstood, their actions shaped by a world that was both beautiful and terrifying? Do you think the Vikings were driven by a desire for conquest or a desperate need for survival?